Welcome to a new episode of the Creative Industry Insight podcast. I'm your host, Bobby. Today, we welcome cinematographer Frederic Van Zandycke, SBC, who joins us to talk about their work on Half Man. Frederic will talk us through his work on episodes 4 to 6 of the show. Please be warned there are heavy spoilers in this episode. Now let's jump into the conversation with Frederic. Hi, Fred. Thank you for joining me today.
Of course, happy to be here.
We're here to talk about Half Man, which has just finished its run on HBO and BBC. Everybody can catch up with it on their platforms and streamings. But before we jump into the project, how have you found the reception to the show?
I think in general, I think pretty good. I think reactions are mixed sometimes because it's not the most easiest show. It's not a relaxed thing to sit back and so I think some people are divided by the intensity of the show, but I think good and overall for what I've heard so far. So yeah, I think it's all right.
Yeah, I think I get the what's it called? Like, I get the people being like, it's not a show that you're going to watch that's going to make you relax, and it's not a laugh a second sort of show. It's very heavy, and I think as well it's perfect that there's like it comes out weekly rather than it's just been dumped at once, because I think having a week to sort of digest and sort of take in what's happening on the screen is a lot as well.
Yeah, that might help. I mean, personally, I don't. It's like, for instance, Euphoria is also one episode a week, and sometimes I like to just watch it in one straight line. So it depends on what you like, I guess. But I have heard some people like the week to digest what they've seen. If you're really into it, yeah, it can be a bit controversial at at times. But yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And I still think it's just, yeah, as I said, it's quite heavy, but it's like amazing that I wonder what it's like. Well, we'll talk about it, like capturing it. But before we get to that, how did the project come about for you, and what made you want to take it on?
I think the project came to me by the director who did episode 4, 5, and 6. I've worked with him for a couple of shows. We did previous shows over the past few years. And if I remember correctly, he was asked to do Baby Reindeer, and it didn't fit the schedule, so he passed on it. And so after Baby Reindeer, this project came up, and they asked him again, and now he was free, and he said sure, and he told me, he sent me the script and he was like, read this, what do you think? And I was just watching Baby Reindeer and I thought, well, this is special, I like this. And I didn't know about the name Richard Gadd until I opened up the scripts with my name on it, and then it said written by Richard Gadd. I was like, who's, I remember that name, did I just, and then I looked it up and I was like, oh, that's this, all right, okay. And I started reading it, and I thought it was very different from anything else that I've read so far. And I was like, all right, this is just different. I like it. It's hard. The lines, the dialogues were really straightforward. As in, yeah, I was really impressed by the dialogues, and I was just, wow, this is something else. And also just when that director, Ashraf is his name, when he says, I'm into something, I'm going to do this, I fully trust him, and I'm like, all right, I'm with you. So before I read it, I said, I'll do it. And then I read it, and I was like, all right, now I really want to do it. And it got postponed, I think 7 months. We were ready to get into pre-production, and then all of a sudden they said, well, we're gonna postpone it to next year. So that was pretty tough because I really wanted to do it. And I decided to wait and not take on anything else. So, because if you take on something else in that time, most of the time, you're not going to be available at the end. There's an overlap. So I decided to wait, and I was really happy that I did. Uh, yeah.
I think as well, like if you work with someone before, you kind of you'll just jump into it without sort of knowing what you're going to get yourself into. I guess that's like 10% of the risk because it's you know what you to expect when you're working with someone, but then if it's a project that you're like, well, this is actually could be a bit too much for me. I'm not sure how it could go down, but then
But
with
yeah, to be fair, you never know. I have that talk with a lot of people. You read something and it can be really good, but you don't know what it's going to be like on set, what the production is going to be like, what struggles you're going to encounter, and so it's always kind of a blind jump sometimes into what you're going to get into. Especially for this project, I had no clue what I was getting into, even though I knew the scripts and I knew it was going to be tough. I never imagined my life being the way that it was during that production, which was pretty intense.
yeah, and especially with like something like this where it is heavy in terms of just dialogue and themes, but then also the sort of stage directions on it as well, and especially in like episode 6 when you end up going to like the bathhouses as well. Like
Yeah.
those were very what's it called, intense scenes.
Well, to be fair, I
And
mean, maybe I'm jumping ahead, but the bath scenes, there was a lot more bath scenes which were not used, which were cut, which I thought was really sad, but there was a lot more of that sauna type environment and scenes. Uh, but I mean, that was really cool to shoot, actually. It was one of the more relaxed days, if you can put it that way.
I guess it's because there's so much intensity and anger in the show that like
Yeah.
I guess like when you're capturing those performances, you're seeing an actor go like build up, or because it's sort of your episodes are later on in their lives and they're in different spots of their lives as well. They're just, they're even angrier, they're even more lost. They don't know what's going on in their
Yeah.
lives in a way. Um, but what I'm curious to know about is how do you position the camera so you can allow the actor to perform and not let the camera get in the way of it as well?
That's a good question. I think, um, being giving that this is really like a dialogue-driven show most of the time. There's really big scenes of heavy dialogue and really intense. It was really like a puzzle to see how we would approach it. It was, for instance, let's take the hospital scene in episode 4, which was a very, very big scene. We knew it was all over the place, and it was a long scene, and so the takes were really long. I think the takes were like 20 minutes every time we did a take, and we just said like, hey, we're gonna do a medium, and I'm just gonna follow you around. Just do whatever you like, and I'll just follow. And we go through the line of where you're going to be. So you're going to start on the bed, then you're going to end up here, then you throw them on the bed, then you throw them on the ground. So I kind of know the line of where we're going, and I rehearsed it like really technical, like sit here, sit there, just that, and then we just go, and I stay back. I don't go too close, but when I know they're freezed for like a minute or 2 minutes, they stay in the same position. I do allow myself to go and push in a bit, and then when I know there's gonna be a bit more action, I'll just pull back to let them do whatever they want to do. And I think it worked really well. We never really got into each other's spaces of like, hey, I want to do more, but I knew I could not, like sometimes when you have a close-up, you do a lot of lighting, you do an eye light, and you do this and that. I knew for most of these scenes, it was about the acting, and I just have to stay back and just let them do and set up as much as I can without interfering or have like people running around with flags or lights. So it was more, yeah, it was more dialogue driven than actually a visual type stylized thing that we did.
Yeah, like I'm just picturing now that when it comes to lighting, you're lighting the area rather than the actors themselves, so that,
Yeah,
as
yeah,
you
yeah.
said, like you don't have someone sort of getting in the way, lighting eye lines and even with the flags. And I can then imagine that you have like a bigger area to play around, especially when you're talking about in episode 4 in the hospital, because it's the build up, it's the intensity, it's the at first looking at them conversations, and then what's their actions and reactions going to be. But as you're mentioning, is like you allow them to perform, and then when you need to go in for their emotional moments, you go in. I guess that's probably comes down to instinct as well, because if you're operating, you know when the right moment is to sort of start coming into them, and
Yeah,
from the
yeah.
rehearsal period as well.
We didn't really do that much rehearsal on that. So that set, the hospital set, was a studio that was built with the idea in mind of what. So we first started with the choreography of what's going to happen, where are we going to end up, and knowing that he was going to push him to a wall and throw him down. So they designed the set around that choreography. So the space was pretty large, sometimes maybe a bit too large for me. I'm not bothered being in small spaces. Um, but I mean, we did have enough space to just be wherever we wanted to be. Um, and there wasn't that much rehearsal. It was more of like, we know where you're gonna go, sort of, and then just see what you feel. And I just gave like minimal markers that, like, if there's a big dialogue that you're standing across from each other, um, it would be best if you would be here, like in this line. Don't turn with your back to that light, or don't turn. So I gave minimal instructions of that. Like, it would be great if you end up on the bed at the end, sit here and sit there. That would be great. And it's again in that same line. And they followed that fairly well. And that's actually the only thing I really said. And also, Jamie Bell is an incredible technical guy as well. So I mean, you can ask him literally everything, and he will do it spot on every take, which was insane. Sometimes I gave him like a small remark, like at the end, just look that way instead of that way, if you want to do that, and or just position your head a little bit more, just for that highlight, because I know I don't have the tools to really do that, and he helped me out amazingly with that. He was always looking like, is this right? Is it, without interfering with his acting? So that really helped me out a lot.
Yeah, and I guess when you have someone like that, it, as you said, helps you out a lot. But then also, you could probably cheat a little bit with your lighting and how you probably have your setups as well. Um, but then also, like having an actor understand like why they need to do it, or they'll just do it, sort of thing. Yeah, I wonder what his sort of thinking is behind it as well, as like technical wise, and like how he's sort of playing on his experience as well, being on set and knowing when to move or where you're going to be as well.
You mean Jamie?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I mean, we I was lucky enough to really get along with Jamie from the get-go. We were also staying in the same building. My apartment was in the same apartment building as his, so we were pretty close to each other throughout the 6 months we were in Scotland, and we developed some kind of friendship, which really helped in terms of, if you have some ideas, if you have some questions, sometimes you have to search your limits of what you can do with an actor, or ask of an actor. And with him, I really knew, like, I can ask a lot of him, and he's not going to be like, that compromises. He would tell me if it would compromise him, but actually he never said anything when I asked him to do special things. And he's also in every single scene. So every shooting day I had was with Jamie. So by the time you get to 30 shooting days, you kind of know each other in a way of, like, he knew what I was going to do or where I was going to be. He kind of got to know how the director and me approached a scene. And he fairly knew, like, you're probably going to be here and probably going to do this. And So it was a really easy way of working with him.
It's still crazy though as well, like knowing that as an actor you're on pretty much every day in every scene as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't really think about that actually. That's probably an absolute
There's
nightmare
not a single
schedule.
scene. Yeah, there's not a single scene in episode 3, 4, 5 where Jamie is not in the scene. He's literally in from the beginning to the end. He's always there, because we follow it through Niall's eyes. But that means that it was really intense for him, because there was a lot of dialogue, a lot of long days. We did sometimes we did 6 days in a week, a lot of night stuff, and he'd be absolutely hammered from one day, and then he had to go back home and just study like 13-page dialogue for the next day, and so it was tough for him. I'm still amazed in how he got through it so well, the way he did.
Yeah, yeah, which again, yeah, really intense, and also to be like in that character as well, and
Yeah, yeah,
having acting against Richard Gadd as well, who's also the writer and producer. Like that must feel a bit weird being like reading his words, but then also being like, I wonder what sort of hat he has on today as a creative or producer. What's going to happen? Because there's probably so
exactly.
much, yeah, going on in his mind, and also the fact that you're playing someone who's already been portrayed in the first 3 episodes, so you need to pick up on the mannerisms from someone who's
Yeah,
created it. So you kind of have to take the baton from someone else and then sort of build on it as well.
yeah, and I think he did fantastic. I mean, he really studied what the first actor did, and then again he went with it. I think I remember the director saying to me after he did the edit that there was barely any take of any scene that he didn't like what Jamie did. Sometimes you have actors that have to search like where we're going with this, or no, that wasn't a good take. Let's go again. And Jamie would be very tough on himself, saying like, "Yeah, I didn't like that. Let's do another one." While we were all like, "Well, this was it. This was great, right?" He's like, "No, no, no. Let's go again." He was really tough on himself. While actually, I never looked at him doing anything that we were like, "That's a bit off. Maybe that doesn't feel right." It was just for us, it was pretty spot on every single take. So yeah, it was
I just
really impressive.
I'm just impressed by that. But then also, I guess as a performer, you want to get you might have nailed it, but like 90% on a take. But then you can know that in yourself, you can just do one more. And especially if it's such a dialogue heavy scene, because how do you, or do you just start from the beginning with what you're saying and building up the intensity, or do you just go from a line and play it from there? I always wonder how people remember like lines, especially if there's like 13 pages of dialogue, because I don't know about you, but like at school, you used to sort of do spelling tests. So you'd always like teach yourself words. And like
Yeah,
that was difficult to remember like 12, 15 words or whatever sometimes. But maybe because it's the pressure of a test. But then there's the pressure of camera stuff. It's like, yeah, 13
it's a
pages.
mystery
Wow.
to me. I still don't get. There's a reason why I'm not in front of the camera, I guess, because I absolutely couldn't remember lines, and especially here, Richard was really down to like he insisted on every word being like it is on the page. Sometimes you have a scene and your actor does something else with it, which is great. Like he like that line. I'll just say it differently because that's how I feel. This was not the case here. Most of the time, it was exactly like it was on the page. Uh, every word, every like. So when you take the script and you put it next to the episode you see now, it's literally all there. So Jamie did nailed every sentence, especially in these long scenes. I have no clue how he did it, but and
Yeah,
he did
just,
it.
yeah, amazing. And then also not being able to like ad lib a little bit. A bit mean of him, isn't it? A bit mean. Um, but going back to sort of the look of the show, because you're spanning on the later half of the show, so what 2000 and hold on,
Eight.
yeah, so you have 2008, 2010, and then sort of 2014. Because there's such small time gaps between each episode, but then there's
Yeah.
also a big jump from episode 3, which is 1993. How did you go
Yeah.
about thinking about the look of something that's wasn't so far away in time for us to create the look of the show, but then also to sort of keep it in line with what's come previously?
I mean, to be fair, that was a bit of a difficult search. We really had a bit of a vision. The director and me were really like, all right, we jump ahead in time. The characters have grown up, they're matured, so we wanted to feel a bit more grounded. In the 80s, like episode 1, 2, 3, there's a lot more shoulder work going on. The colors are a bit different. We really wanted to feel a bit more grounded, and we wanted to show, especially in episode 4, a bit more of the absence of, like, it's just Niall in his own little world. And so we decided to be a lot more on tripod, on dolly. Of course, there are scenes on shoulder to mix it in, but a lot of the scenes were on head, instead of on shoulder. And we went a little bit darker. We opted for a bit more contrast because it's just the story also gets darker and feels a lot more serious now. There's the playfulness of the 80s, if you can call it that, has gone. So yeah, that's what we pushed on. And of course, there was a lot of talk of, it has to look like part one. We were like, so there was a bit of discussion sometimes, like, but we jump ahead 15 years or so, or more. It's all right. It can look a bit different, but so there was a lot of going back and forth, like, watch out, look at part one. So there has been a lot of talk about that. But I mean, we this is what we tried, and the grade a lot was softened and to look a bit more like block one. Um, so not all of it, of the look that we were going for, remained, if I can say it that way. But I mean, I understood why. Sometimes it was just a little bit difficult to see it happen because you had another look on set and another look in your mind. But that's what happens if you do a second part.
Yeah, and I guess as well, like because there's probably editing the first block and getting that together, it's probably a little bit difficult to actually sometimes like not understand, but like try to create the same visual style. Especially if you're going, as you said, you're going from a you're jumping so far ahead. But then also, I guess you can play on it visually, like the first block, because they're younger. It could be like a lot more carefree as like
Yeah,
young adults and whatnot. And now you're in the reality of like being an adult, where there's a lot of stuff that people don't tell you about when you grow up, and it's like it's not just the
yeah,
bills, but it's like
sure.
the everyday battles and whatnot.
Yeah, but that's what we went for. We really wanted to. I mean, there's a big gap in between, so we're like, it can be approached a bit different. So that's what we tried. And we we shot a lot of wide shots, and that's what the director and me really liked to show Niall in his world, and he's very small in this space. So we did a lot of wide shots for all 3 episodes. And of course, then you see the editing, and you see that most of your wide shots were not used. So sometimes I was like, "Huh, what's going? Where's the wide?" Yeah, it never made the cut. And but I mean, and for the most part, I understand why Richard really wanted to stay close all of the time with the characters. And sometimes we were like, "But let's have a break from it and just let's breathe a little bit, show the world." But that didn't really make the cut. So, but that's I
Yeah,
mean, it's not the first time that's happened.
but I think as well, like the way like people are framed, because even if you do have a wider shot or like a I'd say mid to slightly wider, you do have the actor in the middle of the frame rather than like third wise. It's not in every shot, but it's very interesting to see like that feels like the character's talking at you in a way, but then also you can feel that
Yeah.
distance away from the characters when they're performing as well.
Yeah, I think that the most when I did like dialogue scenes that they're really sitting across from each other, I always, because it's really uncomfortable, and I framed them in a way that the faces are mostly not in the middle and not even in the rule of thirds, but the opposite sides. So counter framing, they're more on the edge of the screen, and there's a lot of space on the negative side, and which they allowed me to do. And I really like that, to really make it feel uncomfortable. They're really boxed in, especially Niall. He's always trying to fight something or explain something, but he's always boxed in. So that was our approach to it, in combination with a very solid wide. But yeah, I think in most of the scenes, sometimes there's like a 2 or 3 second wide shot in it, and then that's it. Um,
But it
while we on set, we're like, well, this is going to play out in the wide a long time. I mean, you can stay on this wide for like 40 seconds and then go to close. So it was a different way of telling the stories. But that's a lot of the times the story gets remade in the edit, and so that's what happened here. Which, I mean, I
yeah.
I still think it's really good. It holds up.
Yeah, and I guess as well, like at the time, the idea could be really great, but then part of it might not work just because it's like,
Yeah,
oh,
for sure.
this has slightly changed, or like the flow of the scene, or what they might have an idea in post, or what they might
Yeah,
come up with in post.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like even when they're after they're shooting, they're still trying to find the scene a bit, even though they have the material. I guess it's just the clay to
Definitely,
put it
definitely.
a bit.
Yeah. There were a lot of scenes that were longer than they are in the show. Just trying to find the best way, and especially Richard, like I said, really wanted to be on top of your characters and really be close to them and really feel. So that's how the edit ended up, and I think it works really well.
Yeah, and I think there's also dialogue scenes. I know that you're mentioning it, but like not having as many over the shoulder shots, you do have a lot more like two two actors in the same frame, which I personally like at times because it's just you don't need to have so much chopping and changing to see people's reactions, and it allows the scene to play out more.
Yeah,
And I guess it's also knowing that if you have that take, or that sort of that take with the camera angle, then you can maybe allow the actors to sort of react a bit differently, knowing that they're not going to be just over the shoulder and sort of like back and forth.
yeah, they have a lot more freedom to express. There's more body language to be seen. Um, we really like that. The two shots. I think in every big dialogue scene that they sit on a table or in a bar or whatever, there's always a very distinctive two shot straight in the middle, that returns in most of the scenes. And I think that was from the beginning. That was like a main picture of uh, the split in half, and you have these two um, facing each other, and that was like a main thing. And so I'm happy that made the cut, um, in most of the scenes that it's in there. At least.
Yeah, and I think with those scenes as well, when you have them like sitting side by side and they're both there, again visually it's quite cool because you can see the sort of size difference of people, but then also just the sort of
Yeah,
body language of the actor and the way that they're sort of their like posture and the way they move,
yeah, yeah,
which
yeah.
I find is
I think
interesting as well.
especially here, like having Ruben facing Niall and seeing the difference in this body. Like Niall is a smaller character, and then you have Ruben, who's such an imposing figure, and showing that in that two shot really worked.
Yeah, and I think as well, like even though it could be like obvious as like for like audience members, but it's also just like visually it's cool and you can actually understand and like promos and whatnot to see like this is a slightly different show with the characters and how they're going to be like how their physical builds play into it. But I think there's also like episode 6 where when Niles with the police, the way that's framed with his fake lawyer as well, um
Yeah,
because it's just the sort of different mannerisms that the policeman have, what Niall have, and then also what the lawyer has as well, in the way that the lawyer's sort of standing up straight and having that sort of false bravado of it. Niall's obviously, dejected, and then the police are just normal.
Yeah, I think that was what I mean. In episode 6, that's one of the few funnier scenes, if you can call it that. There's a bit of a breeze there, even though the situation is pretty troubling. But I think we opted there to really keep it locked off and don't do over shoulders. Just have a 2-shot and a 2-shot, and play that, and just have them be. I don't know how I can explain it properly, but just the lack of anything. There's not really close up. It was just 2 versus 2, and the it's very dry, if that's the correct way of saying it. It's very. I mean, I think that helped a bit with the humor of it, for just showing it like how miserable in whatever situation we are in. So yeah, I think we only shot 2 shots in that scene, and not go close.
I think as well, like you see the spectrum of like the seriousness and also the sort of wackiness of like the characters, then also who's playing it straight and who's not. Because you have that sort of, as you said, like having the humor, but then also somebody sort of playing it differently just makes it sort of, as an audience member, like, yeah, you're sort of just laughing at it because you're lost in the performance, but then also in the way that they're portraying it as well, and thinking that is correct.
Yeah, I think the scene just needed to feel a bit awkward in general, and I think that was a good way of helping that. Just playing it out on the 2 shots and not moving the camera, and just have it locked off and be very just awkward staring at each other.
Yeah,
So I think
exactly.
that helped.
Yeah, 100%. And what I'm curious to know about as well, because you were mentioning earlier about the sort of scenes at night and and having them a little bit darker. And I think you notice, like especially in episode 6, when they're outside in the car parks, but then also the bar scenes, which are littered in 4, 5, 6, and then also hospital scene where it's set at night. Is there, because they are sort of lowly lit and have a different sort of feel to it, was there any time that you might be worried that you might make it a bit too dark and not allowing it to be slightly brighter? Because I think as experience, when you go to like a car park, for example, there's always going to be some sort of lights that are out. There's certain areas that are going to be slightly darker. But I always think of like Terminator 2 when they shoot at night and it's also sort of like brightly blue. Do you ever think of going
Yeah,
for something like that look, or did you think it would just be too drastic from what's come before?
but I think in general, my approach to night scenes and stuff like that, I don't want to. It depends on the project, of course, but in general, I tend to do it as natural as it is, and just not light it with the feeling like, oh, there you have that moonlight, or there you have that. I always try to search for lights that make sense. I think most of the DPs try and do that. I always go back to the film Prisoners for that. There's a lot of night scenes in that movie, and of course, it's Roger Deakins, one of the best. But it's always a good reference for me in that film. There's like a night vigil, and then he runs after a guy that looks interesting, and he follows him through the backyards. I don't know if you've seen it, but they run through the backyards of houses, and there's no moonlight. It feels just lit by the lights of the house, the street lights, just only that. And I always try and do the same sort of approach, like what is here and how can we not have big moonlights and big stuff going on. Of course, you always end up in locations that have absolutely nothing. So for instance, Ruben's house in episode 4, there's a lot going on the street. He runs away from Ruben. He walks up the driveway, stuff like that. I remember that street being very difficult because there's absolutely nothing there. The street lights were not working. Um, there was just no light at night. So we really, and it was also a dead end, that street. So and most of the time we were shooting somewhat of 360, and I was like, shit, how are we going to approach this street? Because I wanted to put up a big machine for an overhead light, a very soft overhead, but there was no room to place it. We could not block the street. We could not put it in someone's yard. There was absolutely no place. So we really had to plan, like, all right, we're going to put the machine here and we're going to shoot only this direction. And then we need time to move the machine all the way over there to the other side of the street, not block it, but just like, and move the overhead. So we just have a little bit of, fill in that street, and then put up all the street lights ourselves, and have some makeshift house lights that we just, the neighborhood was really welcoming, so we were allowed to put lights on houses left and right, just to have something going on, because that was really a tough area. Trying to think of other night stuff that was really tricky. The scene where the same scene where he runs away from Ruben and he ends up in a backyard to the dollhouse. That as well. That was a scene like, hey, the schedule is really tight. Where are we going to place this? And then we were shooting a scene from another episode, and they were like, but they have a backyard here. Let's just try and do it here because we are here, so it makes sense in the schedule. But then you go to the backyard and there's absolutely nothing. It's pitch black. And I was like, oh man, what are we gonna, like, where's the light coming from? Where there's nothing here that helps us. And then again, I went back to Prisoners and looked at that scene. I was like, where is that light coming from? It's always house lights. So I luckily the neighbors allowed us to put something up in the in the yard just next to it, and that was a sort of house light that lit that yard, and that was the way to approach it. I didn't want a moonlight over there or anything like that. So yeah, that's what we did.
I think it's interesting, sort of like getting to the mindset of like getting into your mindset of like how you're going to shoot it, and then also the research of like other shows like Prisoners. I've seen Prisoners, but I haven't seen it in some time, so I can't remember exactly the scene that you're talking about. But I do get the overall gist of it, because it feels like there's certain times like they're like the petrol station and the way that's lit, and it's just like the light coming from the petrol station rather than everything thinking about the moonlight. I think also the bit scene where they're running through the gardens to the dollhouse. Yeah, that's a really good scene, and I think it's really cool. Like you're mentioning, like thinking about where the light's going to come from, and how do we find it out on a house? And then I think it comes from like a security light. But at that time, when you know that the house doesn't have something, it's like, how do we play around with this? And then in your mind, you probably think about the geography of the location to think, if there's no light here, then maybe I can cheat it by putting a light somewhere else to play around with it a bit more.
I mean, the scene is really short, actually, the running part, and we wanted him just running down the street, and it was a dead-end street, and there was nothing there, and there was just one shed, and I remember we put a light up that was like motion activated, sort of, so he runs into the darkness, and then just at the end the light pops on, and you see a little bit that he just leaves into the next to the shed. So that was just a very small eye light that we, that we just like remote control, just let it pop on and have something there. And then the next garden, like the neighbor's garden, was just 100 miles away on on another location. We just tried to merge it and make it feel like one. But yeah, most of the time we just spend looking at houses and being like, what light can be attached to that house that makes sense. To have a source of what should be there.
Yeah, which is quite funny as well, though, the idea of like, what did you do? I would just use the motion, the touch one, and played around with the.
And that I have to give credit to Prisoners, because that happens in that scene as well. And I thought it was so great that he doesn't see the guy running, and then all of a sudden a motion light activates and you see his his silhouette running through the yard, and it always stuck to me. And I thought I wanted to pay homage to that one day, and this was a great way of doing it. And it doesn't stand out that much, but I do have to give credit that I was inspired by it. My
And I
privilege
think
for that.
but now you mention it, kind of like I can see it, I can see the vision and understand it. And Roger, if you're listening, thank you very much.
My hat's off to that man.
um, sorry, when you're talking earlier, you talked about the two shots, and in your episodes, we saw that quite a lot. And I feel like there was always like that with Ruben and Niall and the build up to it. And you can kind of see like the different sizes and the different elements, different environments that they were in until you get to their conversations in prison. And obviously, you can't allow to have the two shots there because there's obviously the glass that's going to be between them. Did you feel like then with those setups, you'd have to think differently in how you're going to shoot that and how you wanted to portray, like how much, like the sort of style that you wanted to go for? So it was not an extreme close up, but like their head and face filled the frame, so you could see their reactions to different moments as well, especially when you get towards the end, when they confess things to one another.
Well, the thing is that you know that it's a very long scene, so you need a lot of coverage, and especially it gets really intense and really emotional. So obviously you want to get in close, especially by the end. The interesting thing is that there was a very solid two-shot in prison. There, if you watch the trailer, the first trailer that came out, the two-shot is in the trailer. So it existed. It was not used in the cut. I don't really know why, but I guess they just wanted to stay fairly close. But we did have the whole scene in a two-shot, and then we worked our way in from a solid medium and a closer one and a profile, and we knew we really wanted to very close, like a 100 millimeter on each of them, because it gets that intense. We also shot that scene with 3 cameras at the same time, so it was kind of a puzzle because there were a lot of reflections with the glass. There was no room for lights because the light would be in the reflection of the B cam, or it would be in the reflection of the C cam. So it was a real big puzzle, and really squeeze all the cameras together with a 75 and 100 and then a profile. And because we only had, I think, a day and a half to shoot the prison scenes, which was not much if you see how lengthy the dialogues were. So we really had to throw all we had at it, and just make sure you have everything covered as much as you can. Because if you have a scene of 10 minutes of just sitting, you want enough variation, and you want to be able, there's nothing you want to miss, especially in the eyes and the way, but also in the way they sit, like in the body language. So if you have the medium covered, the close covered, the profile covered, and then even another closer version of it, you sort of have the main part of it. Because it was, again, like it was about the dialogue and how they look at each other. So it didn't require any fancy shots or special angles, or that was not, would have been cool maybe, I don't know. But you read the scene and it's not about special great visual tricks or anything. It's just down to the core. If that answers your question.
Yes, because I guess with like those sort of scenes, because we've seen those sort of scenes play out, and sometimes you think about like how do you, as a cinematographer, allow, like, what is it that's going to be important in those scenes? So sometimes for, like, I don't know, maybe like Silence of the Lambs is an example, because you have the glass panels. There's a big moments where they kind of have to show off the production design to show the sort of extent of like what's holding Hannibal Lecter back. But here it's so much more focused on big moments between the two characters, like letting know.
I think, I mean, to be fair, the two big prison scenes start off with a wide, so you show the environment, you show where we're at, and once you've seen that, you don't need it anymore. and then it's about the two sitting, the tension between the two. So we did shoot just the beginning of every scene. We did shoot like a wider version or an intro for, I think for not only the beginning, I think we shot half of the scene in that wide. We just, it was only used in the beginning, and then you stay with them, which makes sense. So yeah, you show, I mean, of course you want to show that prison because that was a big set. There was no prison to be found anywhere near Scotland. I think that maybe there was one, but it was so far away that we quickly decided that that should be just a set that was built for us, which was, of course, easy for me to, shape it a bit more to what I wanted it to look like. So yeah, that helped, of course, knowing what lights. I had everything under control: the ceiling lights, the small lights, all the lights and reflection. So it was a big setup, but it helped a lot, knowing the amount of time you had for such a big scene.
Yeah, and knowing that you have a day and a half, that must be stressful. And as you said, and also the big dialogue scenes, I feel like they're sort of the glue that hold the episode together because you're there a number of times, and they sort of like maybe just like interludes to what's happening in their lives. In a way, it's like how do we catch up back to, back to them, and how do we then push it along? But yeah, a day and a half, blimey.
Yeah, but it was the same for the hospital scene. I don't know if you remember, but the hospital scene was, I think, 16 minutes long. And we had, 1 day to do that whole scene, and then a small portion of the other day to do the beginning of him sitting in the chair and Niall in the bed. But as soon as they start fighting and they get up, that was 1 day. We just had 1 day to shoot it. And we were like, this is pretty intense. I mean, you have 16 pages or 14 pages, something like that. I think for 1 day, I mean, that's pretty. And they just said, take as many cameras as you want. Just make it happen. And being in that space, it's not possible to just put up 4 cameras and have a bit of control. So we shot it with 2. Always like a medium and a profile version. That's how we attacked it, and we surprisingly we ended up half an hour early that day. Everyone was exhausted, but we did end up early, which to everyone's surprise, we were like, how do we do that? What happened? But I think the focus, the tension was so big, being like, we have 1 day and this is so important, that the focus was just like there. Nobody was running around. It was just go, 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 take after take after take, just get it. And that helped making that day possible.
Yeah, well, I'm surprised that you managed to finish 30 minutes early, considering how much you had to do. But then it's true, having what's it called? Everybody's so focused that they probably, most people didn't really look at the clock whilst they were doing it. But then it's the same when you're talking about, you could just put as many cameras as you want. Like, yeah, a bit difficult when you have a certain space and movement and whatnot. But I think that sometimes that comes down to people trying to be helpful, but not actually realizing sometimes the vision of, like, on paper is probably good, but then practically it's not going to actually work, unless you want people in the shot, and basically ruins everything that you've done for the day.
No, exactly. See, I mean, it was the same with the prison. Like, take as many cameras as you want, just make it happen in that day and a half. And so that's why we used three cameras at the same time. But I think I don't think it was possible to fit in a 4th camera because we were all so squeezed up. But it did help. I mean, I think that was the only way to get through that much dialogue in 1 day or 1 day and a half.
Yeah, it's crazy though. That is very, very, intense. But I guess it somehow worked, and it shows on the screen. I've got 3 more questions left. So for my third and final, what was your favorite scene that you didn't shoot?
You mean from episode 1, 2, 3?
Yeah.
Well, that's a good question. I liked a lot of scenes. For some reason, I really liked the courthouse, the standoff between the two and the tension that was there. I thought that was really well done. The soundtrack that played, everything. I really liked that scene, and I wish we had a courthouse scene as well. I was jealous of that. I thought that was really well performed and well executed. So I really like. There's a bunch of other scenes that I also like, but for some reason that one stuck to me.
Cool. That's a solid choice. For my penultimate question, what was your favorite scene to shoot?
Hmm. I never really thought about that. I while we're talking about, I really enjoyed the prison scene. I really liked the way it turned out. To just like start drawing your idea of a prison and how you kind of want it to look like, of course, together with your production designer. Um, but seeing it built and then being there and looking forward to it for like 2 months to actually see the prison, how it turned out, and then be able to light it and see if you can get that atmosphere that you had in mind. And I think for the prison, it really that was really what we were going for, the way it looked. So I think it was very stressful, but it was a really nice scene to see them just interact the way they did, and to see that idea that you had in your mind come to life. I think that's really it makes it's a special feeling, I guess. But there were a lot of scenes. I think that the scenes between Niall and Mona I really loved, because it has a bit of a different dynamic, and the actress that plays Mona, Amy, was also I really liked what she did with the character, and that was really nice to just see and to be there and watch it happen. And I always operated, so I was always very close to it, and it was really, yeah, it was really nice to see that. I don't think I have like one specific scene that I really loved shooting. I thought there were multiple scenes that I really enjoyed, even though there was a lot of pressure throughout the schedule. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a very diplomatic answer, being able not being able to choose one and having a number of them. But I think
Well, no,
it's always
yeah,
difficult.
it's
I think it's difficult
I
because
do have the
go on,
scene. Sorry, yeah, I do have the
go on, go
scene.
on.
The end of episode 5, where he goes to Benji's house and he finds Benji being attacked by Ruben. Um, we really had fun, even though it doesn't look like that. But we really had fun doing that scene. It wasn't really horrific on set the way it is on screen, but I remember we had a vision about that as well, and it turned out exactly what we hoped it was going to be. Um, we wanted to really show the brutality, and I think that worked out great. I remember being really happy at, at the end of that day.
Yeah, and well, it's funny how you say like, yeah, happy with the brutality of the scene, but the way that it's sort of shown. So I think it's also that because as audiences, you know what Ruben is like capable of, but it's the sort of build up to it, and then the fact that it's like silent with just the soundtrack playing, and you're like, oh no, something like something's bad happening, but then when you actually get there and like cuts to the sound of like what's on set, then you're like, wow, like just the sheer brutality and anger of it as well.
Yeah, I think you should. And the scene starts in slow mo, and there's a moment where it cuts. I think 3 or 4 seconds. It cuts to just real time, and I think that's when the aggression hits, because it feels so real, and this is the first time you really see it without any um uh, it's just right in your face what Ruben is capable of, and you've known it, you've kind of seen it, but to actually just have it pushed into your face is pretty intense. And I think that was quite uh good to make Ruben's character, yeah, to build more of his. I'm not saying that correctly. Uh, I think it was necessary for once actually show the violence that Ruben is capable of, even though you've known it throughout all episodes. But that was yeah, I loved the way it turned out.
Yeah, and I think this also comes down to like just the way that somebody can, it's the threat is always there. You're just waiting for it to happen straight away.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite scary to watch. For my final question, is there anything that I might have missed in my questions that you would like to add, or is there anything that you want to ask me?
Oh, oof. I need to think about that. And not on the top of my head, no. I'm really trying to think if there's I mean, there's so many stories about. There's just a ton of it that I could talk about for hours, but not on the top of my head. I can think of a lot of technical stuff that we had to deal with, but yeah, no. I'm trying. Is there anything that you think of that, like maybe technical wise or production wise, that could be interesting?
I think maybe sort of lens choices. Because you mentioned about like how when you were in the prison scenes, 100mm lens, but then there's also I think the wider shots as well. I can imagine that there may be 35mm to 20mm, maybe, or if I've got that completely wrong.
No. I think the lens we used the most was 35 or 40. That's the way the director and also me like to approach most of the dialogue scenes. Start off with a very solid medium shot, which mostly was Leica Similux lenses that we shot on. So I think the 40 was the one that we always started off with, and that was used the most. And then you have a closer version. And most of the time we just took the 40 and just moved it in, instead of just going to a 75. So I think 40 or 50 stayed on most of the time for all the dialogues, except for prison, because you just can't move in that close. And that is one scene that allowed it to go to like 100mm, because I think for the rest of the show we never did that in dialogue. We always stayed with our 40 throughout everything except for the wides. But yeah.
Interesting. I do find as well, like lens choices, that sometimes, like, because as audience members, you're just used to seeing, because you're just watching the show, you're not realizing just actually specific details of lens choices, of how quick, how close, or how far people are, and just like the setup of it as well. Yeah, it's not until you're actually on set and realizing those sort of things, rather than like watching the final thing. Just how effective they can be.
There's different approaches to dialogue, especially if the show is dialogue heavy and you have a lot of. I mean, there's not a lot of action that goes on. It's most of the time they're talking, and I was never really a big fan of like these close-ups that your face fills the screen and there's nothing in the background, is just a mush. I always like to keep something of the background there to place the characters. So even though if we wanted like a closer version of the medium, we just, like I said, we pushed in with a 40 and still have a little bit of the environment there without just, putting your lens wide open and have the whole background disappear and just have only the face in focus. It did happen once in a while. I think in the barn, there's a couple of shots where that happened because we wanted to be so close. But most of the time, it's placed in a solid medium.
Yeah. Again, just interesting to understand the creative choice and thinking behind it. I know you spoke about it earlier as well, but I should have asked about lens choices when we talk about it then. But no, I'm glad we still got that answer. Fred, thank you so much for your time today.
Of course, I was glad to be here.
Half Man is streaming now on BBC iPlayer in the UK and then HBO in probably America and other countries. Go out and see Fred's amazing work in episode 4, 5, and 6. Thank you again, Fred.
Thank you very much.
You take care. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.